All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Laura Klusterman. I'm the Executive Director for Badge of Life Canada, and I'm a retired OPP officer. I will let Lance introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lance Valcour. I'm retired from the Ottawa Police Service, and we'll kind of get into this in a little bit, but I had a very, very interesting, very varied career, and I'm very much looking forward to this chat with Laura.
Awesome. Thanks, Lance. All right. So we have a few little housekeeping things. One is going to be the disclaimer. The one disclaimer is that probably between Lance and I, there will be some foul language because when you're dealing with both two cops, there's going to be some swearing. We're also real life. We're realists. So that's the way it goes. And because this is the way that we want it to be as authentic and as vulnerable as possible, because we want this to be real, because the topic that we're going to be covering is real. And in saying that, the topic is heavy, 100%. The topic is very, very heavy. For the people that are watching this, I want you to, afterwards, look after yourself. If something doesn't sit with you well, and not that it's triggering you, if something that you don't agree with, or something is just like you feel you want to challenge us on, I encourage you to put it in the chat. We have our producer that is monitoring the chat that can ask the question or the comment. That's the way that we learn. That's the way we're going to grow. And that's how we're going to move this needle forward, is to be challenged and to answer those questions. With the disclaimer also is, if you need help, if you are seeking immediate help, there is a 988 crisis line that I encourage you to call. I also encourage you to reach out afterwards when something's, I need to talk to someone. There are all kinds of people and all kinds of supports out there. If you were to Google or get on Badge of Life Canada, my information is out there. Lance's information is all out there. Please don't hesitate to reach out to someone if you have any questions or if you have any concerns. And again, just enjoy what's being spoken about and learn something from it, because we are never going to create new culture around mental health unless we want to listen to the hard facts and learn from our mistakes. So Lance, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you want to start from the very beginning, let's start about your career, because it all plays a role. All plays a very, very deep role. And I won't interject with a question until the very end, or if I want you to expand on something. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So if it's okay with you, I think I'll move back even further than the career. In Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a term called family of origin. So it's very important that when I'm looking at this, and when people who are struggling with addictions, kind of like, what happened? How did I get to where I got to? How did that little boy originally in Kempville, which I'm now living there again. We moved when I was 10 in 1967 to Iroquois on the St. Lawrence River. How did that little boy, who was raised as a Catholic, an altar boy, eventually a lifeguard, a referee in chief, and the carryout guy at the grocery store, who was always, maybe a little bit shy but pleasant, how did he turn into what he turned into? And so that was my upbringing in those little small towns. And I was first introduced to the Ontario Provincial Police, where you worked there, both at the grocery store, at the hockey rink, and down at the beach. They would kind of drive around and stop. And eventually I was maybe 16 or 17. This is very different rules back then. One in particular, an OPP officer said, "Hey, would you like to go for a ride along sometime?" Like, that'd be fantastic. So here I am, like 16, 17, going for a ride along with an OPP officer. And I loved every bit of it. And that's when I knew I wanted to be a police officer. In fact, I wanted to join the OPP, but back in the day, you had to be 21 to join the OPP. So what I decided to do was I would join the Ottawa Police. Now, full disclosure, I barely made it out of high school. My marks were very poor. In fact, I graduated from grade 13 and with an astounding average of 52%. And the only reason I got 52% was because I got the 95 in music. I played C flute, and in fact, that's something I'd like to do again. So that kind of bumped up my score. So I came to Ottawa. My brother and his wife were living in Ottawa. I lived with them. I got a job at Beaver Lumber, and I applied for the Ottawa Police. And again, rules are very different. It was like, okay, the most critical question they asked back then was, what sports do you play? And because I played all team sports, I got in the Ottawa Police, right? It wasn't overly sophisticated. And started, a training officer and went to OPC. We're actually the second class into Ontario Provincial Police College. And came back, and this is a kind of a seminal moment, and I won't get into any great details, but within about a week or 10 days of coming back and being with the coach officer, we were responded to a call that changed everything, and it related to a child. And I don't have to go into any more details than that, but everybody that's on this call, as a police officer, as a paramedic, as a firefighter, military, you know exactly what I'm saying. I can remember every aspect of that call, every sound, every smell, everything about that call right now. And when I went home that night, I called my dad, who had served in the Second World War, and I said, Dad, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And he said, listen, son, the rest of your career, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a lot more of this. So if you can't do it, now is the time, right? And so in hindsight, there's probably, today we would have, I think, very different advice, I would hope, for someone that went through that on so early in the career. But the solution that I had for me was I went and got drunk, right? Because that's what you did. And so that was the beginning of the career and the beginning of the path towards becoming an alcoholic.
Now, I've been ED for Bachelor Life Canada for 3 years. One of the biggest things that has been brought in from the very beginning is family. So you've already mentioned your dad. Where does marriage come in, kids come in? At what point in your career did that kind of happen?
Right. So it's actually in the book, which we'll kind of talk about in a few minutes. There's some really wonderful stories about my wife, Lise, in there. And I first met her when I went to Laurentian University to visit another friend. My mother, God rest her soul, she got me to apply to different universities. I said, Mom, you're not getting into a university with 52% average. Like, this is such a waste of everybody's time. But I did it, and sure enough, rejection. So a friend of mine, who ended up being our best man, he went to Laurentian up in Sudbury. So I drove up there in my baby blue 1979 Ford Thunderbird, and we go to this party, and I see this girl across the way, and it's like, wow. And that was the beginning of about a 7-year journey between trying to go from just knowing her to playing tennis and cycling in Ottawa to becoming friends, and then best friends, and then special friends, and all these other definitions that she had, and then eventually getting married and having children. All the while in the background, the drinking was there. I was, a lot of people kind of think alcoholics as the people you see in the street. Back, probably politically incorrectly, we used to call them rubbies, like the people that you would pick up on the street, right?
Yes.
And that's what I always thought an alcoholic was, right? It wasn't someone that was a professional, or certainly not a police officer, right? And that how could that be? Yeah, we drank, but that wasn't it. But over time, it wasn't so much, Laura, about the drinking. I was what I think you would call a binge drinker. So my philosophy on drinking was always, if you're going to drink, do it properly. Get drunk. Like, I could not and cannot to this date understand people having a glass of wine. Like, what are you doing? Like there's a bottle there. Like, drink the whole damn thing. What's wrong with you? Like, That was my mindset, right? And that probably goes back to my first drunk. Um, that was we were about 16, and somebody got us a bottle of Mickey gin. In fact, the uh, second chapter of the book starts, "Lemon gin changed my life forever." Kind of catchy, I guess. And it did, because the first time I got drunk, for the first time in my life, I felt normal. I felt accepted. I felt um, like I wasn't this weird guy, right? That always had these crazy thoughts in my head, right? It was fun. So back to drinking and all that is what started to come with that was anger and frustration about why this wasn't happening or that wasn't happening, and that eventually started to take its toll, because outwardly, when I was at work, I was like, you have to be professional, you have to act in a certain way and talk in a certain way. At home, that was not who I was, and that is why the title of the book starts with "If They Only Knew."
So I'm going to back it up a little bit because you said something that I really want to peel back that onion, and that's anger. Because we see anger, we've all worked with people that are angry. And it's like, whew, they can suck the oxygen out of the room with their anger and negativity, right? When I first started on the OPP, I was extremely young. And remember seeing all of these like old men, and they were so angry, like so angry. Looking now, I'm like, were they angry or were they just scared shitless? Because they're coming up to retirement. They're dealing with their demons. So I want you to delve into a little bit, and then we're going to kind of like shift gears into the book. I want you to delve into the anger piece because everybody glosses over anger because that's a socially acceptable emotion, right? Oh, they're just angry. When really it's an iceberg, because it's not socially acceptable to say, oh, Lance, he's probably anxious and depressed, right? It's, hey, he's angry. And then you see that over anger. Kind of delve into that as to when you say that word, what does it mean? Because it's a word we need to know. I want to know, how did it come out? Like, how did it come out at work? And just the various, this is work and this is home. We always say, um, you know, two brains. So give me the anger at work and give me the anger at home.
Yeah, at work it wasn't really. I was, I was never a very big guy. So they taught us back at the police college, that your brain and your mouth are your two best use of force tools, and that's, as a smaller guy, that very much was me. I was never into all that. There were glimpses. People would say, I had one boss who pulled me aside once. He said, "Listen, you're probably going to go places, but you really got to get your face under control, because when someone says something, it's like immediate. It's just like, right? This is bullshit. Look, right? But that's as far as I would go work. Whereas at home, and like, it would be wonderful to truly understand that I've been to a lot of counseling. We can get into that a little bit later. At home, it was Lee's, and to a certain degree, the kids that were the brunt of that. I was never physically uh, um, abusive, but 100% I was emotionally abusive, angry and yelling and screaming, and because it was, well, how am I going to look? This is bullshit, and I'm really holding kind of back here, but the whole kind of, how we're taught from very early on at the police college how to take control of the situation. Right? You arrive,
Yep.
you speak with this voice, you project power, you stop it.
Yep.
Right? Well, that's well and good in a bar fight, but at home to your wife, who is a beautiful human being, that is exactly what I would do, and worse, far worse, emotionally, right? And to the kids, the whole, working shift work, and they'd be, yelling and screaming, and come downstairs, and there's probably a few F-bombs, and like, you guys just shut them. Like, I'm trying to get some sleep. I've been up all like, rah, 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 right? So no surprise, as they got older, it was like, we're out of Dodge, right? Let's all go visit our friends. And so that that was it. That anger, and it got to the point where we can get into it in a bit, where it got too much for my wife, and we can talk about that.
And something that none of them signed up for.
No, nor did they deserve it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Now, in my mind, and I try to, we'll talk about the book, but one of the things I learned is that you try to show, don't tell when you're writing a book. So if people ever read the book, you will see a lot of self-dialogue, right? Where and it's can be very, very negative, my self-dialogue, right? I have to be super careful with that, even today, right? Where she'd be saying, like, why are you being like this? And my self-dialogue and what I'd say to her is, like, why are you being like this? Like, what the? I'm working my ass off here. Like I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Look at me, I got a promotion. I'm doing. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And why are you giving me a hard time here? Because in my mind, everything I was doing was for the family. I mean, that's all horseshit.
Yep.
I know that now, but then it was perfectly clear. We're like, why can't you just do what I'm telling you to do?
And it's justification. So that's a lot of times when we said at the very beginning with the disclaimer, sometimes we're not very good at looking inward, right? Because we deflect. And I'm like, no, that's a problem. And I'm not going to justify. Now we have a question from someone who I absolutely adore, Sid, about alcoholism. And I think that is a very important question because in my position right now, in dealing with like things like corrections and stuff like that, we see people that go, yeah, they drink. Oh, we drink. And I classify it, I'm like, you're an alcoholic. When did you know that you were an alcoholic?
So
versus the social drinker. Like, so we have
yeah.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a few drinks. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting drunk from time to time. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's perfectly fine, right?
Lance, that's a webinar for another day. We can do a webinar on another day for that one.
There you go. So my wife drinks, my kids drink. Like, that's perfectly fine. So what happened was I'd been promoted. I was the staff sergeant in charge of the break and enter squad. And I was taking courses at university, and I was being an absolute asshole, like times a million. And unbeknownst to me, Lise had started going to Al-Anon. And one of my partners back in the day, and I talked about him, I never named him, but talked about him quite a bit. He was the first police officer in Ottawa to openly come out as an alcoholic. And he would come to classes, training days, and kind of talk about it, right? So unbeknownst to me, she went to his wife, who said, listen, you need to go to Al-Anon, and there's something called Serenity Renewal, which is we can talk about later. So she started to get healthy. She started to set up boundaries. She started to understand what was really good. She had been enabling me. So on this day in 1996, she came to me and said, this is it. Like, that's no more. It's over. It's bullshit. Like, I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. And I know, like what? Like I'm doing everything. But it was enough. I could just tell. Normally, the best defense for the old best defense is a good offense. That would work. It wasn't working that day because she had now the tools to put up with boundaries. No, we're not doing this. No, you need to leave. You need to go somewhere else and get help because we're not putting up with this shit anymore. And it kind of came to like, shit, all those other tricks I have aren't working. So okay, just give me a week. I'll give you the fast version of this. So I went to work that day. I phoned the EAP Employee Assistance Program. They put me in touch with the psychologist, Dr. Joe Dietrich, who's now passed away. Go see him the next day, and I spent 50 minutes, ranting and raving about how Lise doesn't appreciate me, right? It's all about Lise. It's all like Lise. At the end of the 50 minutes, and at this stage, I had not had a drink in 1 year. He said to me, okay, I'll see you again next week. I want you to go to AA because you're a dry drunk. I'm going, okay. I walk down the street, Elgin Street, back towards the police department, thinking, pardon my language, would that fucking guy not understand a word I said to him? Like, this isn't about me. This isn't about me. It's about her. Like, what is wrong? Anyways, I take the bus home, go knock on Gary's door. He just lived around the corner from me. Gary A is how we say this. I said, Gary, what's a dry drunk? And he starts chuckling because he'd known for a long time, right? He'd been my partner. He'd known for a long time. Never said a word. Well, come on in, have a cup of coffee. Have a cup of coffee. Long story short, he invites me to come to a meeting with him that night. And I go, there's no way I'm going to a meeting. Like, are you nuts? Like, people are going to see me. Like, I talked to Lise. I went to this meeting, put on a ball cap, sunglasses, coat, go to this meeting in Orleans. And Laura, you have never seen in your entire life, you've never seen so many losers in your life as was in that AA meeting. Like, I looked around, I'm going, holy, this is not me. I'm successful. I'm a staff sergeant with the Ottawa Police. Like, these are a bunch of friggin' losers. He hands me this questionnaire. It's called 20 questions. I'm finally getting to the answer of Sid's question here. He hands me this little pamphlet. It's called 20 questions. And I said, well, give me another one. I'll take it home to Lise and we'll fill it out independent of each other. So that's what we did. And I'm going, yep. No, I don't think so. Yep. No. So at the end of that little exercise, I had, I believe it was 15 or 16 yeses on my questionnaire. She had like 12 or 13 for me, thinking about me. And at the very bottom, it's very small, tiny print that says, if you answered yes to any one of these questions, you may have an issue with alcohol. If you answered questions 2 or more, 2, you probably do, and 3 or more, you definitely have an issue with alcohol. And a freaking light went on. It was like, holy shit. Went to another meeting the next night. Alta Vista open door. Or you've never seen so many warm and accepting and loving people in your life. A lady by the name of Joe, there's always a greeter. Joe, welcomes me, and I'm sitting in the back room, and I've been involved, as a cop. We've all been there, like lots of hairy situations. I, never had to take someone's life, but very close multiple times, pursuits, you name it. Very scary. I've never been more scared in my life. I'm sitting in the room, and they get to a point where it's called the chip system. And, for, a year, you get a cake, 9 months, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. And on this particular animal, 1-4 was called the desire chip. On this particular line, for whatever reason, and it's never happened before, to my knowledge, never happened again, there were people at every one of those stages going up to get the chip. And, right? And I'm sitting there going, I can't keep on doing what I'm doing. Everything's been a lie. It's all horseshit. I don't want it to keep on. Things have to change. And I went up. And it's this desire chip. And all it's saying, not saying you're an alcoholic, just saying you want things to change. That's when I knew. So Sid, sorry for the long answer.
So it's funny that you should say that, because we have one of our volunteers has said that he's gone to an AA meeting and his sponsor said, listen, everywhere you go, it's always a room full of assholes, guess who's always else is in that room? And I'm like, ooh, you're right, because we kind of like, it's the deflection, right? It's like, not me.
There's another, it's a joke, but it's not funny. And that's, how do you know when an alcoholic is lying? And the answer is when they move their lips. And that was my entire life. It was all horseshit. And now I think it's really important to state that just because I went and got a chip, things don't magically get better. There was a long journey after that with lots of counseling, my counseling, Lee's counseling, joint counseling. I tell in the book, I tell about when I went to a place called Camillus Center in Elliott Lake. And I was at that stage, probably a year or two in, I was still not truly accepting it in my heart, right? And I tell some stories from what happened there, including a story of when I actually talked to God and heard him, right? We'll leave that for the book, but it was like, yeah, you finally get to the point, and I'm still, it'll be 30 years next February, and I'm still learning and still finding out things, including about my own family, including things about my own sons, right? That things that I did back then that we don't know today what the long-term impacts are. All I can do is keep on, going to counseling and trying to help. And if I go a little bit sidebar, then I know that Lisa is going to say, "Hold on, time out." Like, no, remember?
And you're gonna listen. And
Yes.
you're gonna listen.
Well, sometimes it might be a little bit of a hold on a second here,
Yeah.
but yes,
Yeah.
ultimately, yes. So, yeah.
I think too, we have to recognize it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And probably everybody on this, like that's watching this live, is like type A personality, get the shit done and move on. That doesn't happen here. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a journey, and you have to keep learning and do the work. And so, Lance, I'm going to tell you right now, you've done the work. Like, you've done the work and you continue to do the work, which is so important. So let's get into the book. I'm going to ask you, we've had this conversation before. Why did you start the book the way that you did?
So, in fact, there's a question here from Leo that talks
Yes.
about suicidal ideation. So, when I first wrote the book, it was for myself. Alcoholism is called it is a disease. It is in the big book of mental health. It's called the selfish disease. And the reason why it's called that is that in order to get healthy, we need to look after ourselves first. It's like I was a lifeguard. And one of the first things you learn as a lifeguard is, somebody's drowning, you swim out, but you stay a safe distance and you communicate, but you're ready to back off very quickly and your foot's kind of up propped. And if they come too close, they're getting the shot right in the chest. If it isn't the chest, it's the face. Only one person's drowning here today, and it ain't me, right? So in AA, we need to look after ourselves in order to give others the help that they need. So I wrote the book chronologically. In fact, the first chapter originally was, I was born in 1957 in Kemptville, Ontario. So fortunately, I had a very good editor, and kind of she came to me, during the process and said, "Listen, this story, I'm not going to get into great detail, but this story, which was a suicidal ideation, it was beyond ideation. I was sitting on the stairs at home with a gun in my hands, ready." And I'd been thinking about how to do this, how to do it in such a way that this wasn't going to be that, but how to do it in such a way that my family could get the benefits, right? Maybe as I'm driving along in a police car, pretend I'm in a pursuit, scream, because this is before you had GPS and all this stuff, right? So, just kind of screaming radio on pursuit, blah, 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 and then they'd be looked after. Like I was having these thoughts on a fairly regular basis. So on this particular case, I was on the stairs at home. And she said, I think you should move that to chapter 1. And I'm telling you, Laura, I had huge reservations about that for various reasons. Talked to Lisa about it. Eventually, that is what we decided to do. It's like 2 pages, and it's, as I've been told, I've got a lot of feedback now from people that have read the book. It is very much not easy to read, but my self dialogue that day. And again, for everybody that's ever been to a scene of a suicide, and I don't know how many people are on this right now, but whoever watches this, I know myself, every time I went to a suicide early in my career, it was like, you selfish prick. Like, how could you possibly do this to your family? Blah, 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 especially when they did it in their own homes,
Yes.
right? That was my mindset. And I can tell you on that particular night, with those thoughts in my head, all I was thinking about how my family would be better off. I was not being selfish. I was doing this for my family because they couldn't. It's not fair to them to keep on putting up with this horseshit, right? I thought I was helping, and fortunately, Louise came and sat beside me and talked to me, and I'm still here.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to delve into a little bit more into that because I think that that is one. It's a word. It's a word, and I don't think that we are, as a society, we've come a long way with our mental wellness, with kind of like, with the stigma, with opening up, cracking open the nut. The word suicide, I can tell you whenever I present, I always say to people, just sit with that word for a minute, because you know that right now people are kind of going, oh no, stop saying that word, stop saying that word. And I'm like, there's the problem. Like, there it is right there. And if it doesn't sit well with people, they need to do some internal dialogue as to why it's not, because it has to be the front of mind all the time of going like, this may happen, and how to, like, and talking about it and opening it up. And I think that that's what you did at the first of the book. Like, I think that you opened it up with like, this isn't going to be, a fairy tale. This was my life. Like, this was my life, and it's fucking real. So let's get real and let's get into business. So let's go. Let's get into the book. Let's get into kind of like talking about it. Um, for anybody that doesn't have it, not just because proceeds are going to three amazing organization, it's a good book. Like, it is going, you're gonna feel the feels. You are going to feel the feels. So Lance, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's talk about the book.
Great. I do want to stress that it isn't all heavy. I tried to intersperse the book with what I believe to be pretty funny stories, and I'm told, and multiple people have said, "Listen, I laughed my ass off and I cried my eyes out." So it isn't like all heavy, right?
Nope.
It's
You're gonna feel the feels. So you're gonna, yeah.
270 pages. There's some, and I think people will chuckle at
Yes.
and interestingly, there's different things will appeal to different people. But so I originally wrote the book for myself, and then thinking, well, I'll share it with Lise and the boys. First Lise, and then if she was okay with it, then share it with the boys. And it was really just about my own catharsis and healing and whatnot. And that was over 4 years ago that I wrote it, and then really just kind of set aside, right? Just sat there, 90,000 words, just sat there, right? I wrote it in 3 months. Got up every morning for an hour and a half and wrote it. That was at the same time I was training. I was massively out of shape, so I was training for a half Ironman. So that was kind of like every morning what I was doing. And then I was invited to speak at a conference called Radcom down east. A friend runs that. His name's Bruce Grandy, and I'd known him from all my interoperability work. He invited me to come speak about interoperability, and I said, "Listen, Bruce, instead of that, what about, I tell this story." There was another. My next book is called "What's Next," and it's more like helping people with making career decisions and retirement decisions. But if I do 50 minutes or 30 minutes on one and then 30 minutes on the other, so that would be great. So that was the first time I spoke about this journey publicly, other than at AA meetings. Well, everybody at an AA meeting is drunk, right? So it's not easy, but it's relatively easy, right? Because for the most part, people aren't judgmental. They probably are, but they keep it in check. But so I told a story, and it was very emotional. But the feedback that I got was, please publish the book, because you will help people. And so, lots more conversations between Lisa and I, because listen, I mean, it's called The Cop's Journey, right? But her journey is right along in there, right? And there's no way, I said, if you say no, this is a full stop. It's not a no, because the kimono was totally open here, right? And yes, it's told from my perspective, but there's lots of her stuff in there too, right? And that's not easy. Like, it's now out there. It's for not just our family, but
Mhm.
whoever, right? So that process took um, well over a year, to the point where, we could go. Actually, a week ago today, we launched it, and thanks very much to Badge Life Canada for kind of doing the media release and kind of getting it out there. But yeah, and uh, it's I've got some pretty special feedback. Even, like, it's kind of amazing how you can kind of order a book and 2 days later it arrives. And I just got an email like 20 minutes ago. I've had phone calls and emails from people that have read it, and they're saying, basically, thank you. And so Lise and I, ultimately, the goal here is, if we can help by being vulnerable, and sharing, then that's great. The final kind of story in making that decision was, I went to a funeral of a police officer that was had I'd been partners with, and I didn't know much about what he kind of went off and did his own thing in retirement. And the minister that was doing the eulogy and the service, he talked about the parable of the talents, right? And basically, the subtext is, don't bury your talents. You got talents, don't bury them. And so I went home to Lise and said, listen, like, I think we should do this, right? If this helps even one person, right, then that's good. And then hopefully through this book sales, which people think, oh my goodness, you make a lot of money. Like, that's not the way that you're an author, so that's not the way that works. But I do sometimes get paid speaking fees to speak, and that can add up. So the goal here is to provide, hopefully, not just some kind of awareness for the badge and Can It Be on the Blue and Serenity Renewal Not Award, but maybe someday actually cut you a check for a few bucks. So that's the goal there.
I appreciate that. So let's kind of delve deeper into the book, because you said the word vulnerability, and that's what the book is all about, right? That's about when you're cracking it open for people to see. On the outside, what would people have seen through your career, and how would they have, like, spoken about you, like, through whatever phases of, like, the promotions, specialized units? On the outside, what did it look like?
Uh, Two halves, in fact, the pre diagnosis and pre kind of AA getting better in the first half. So I tell the story I think it's at the very beginning. I got transferred back to patrol from CID as a patrol sergeant, and a senior constable I went to, how you pull up beside each other, kind of, how's it going? And he says, listen, just so you know, Sarge, I think you're an asshole. I think you've always been an asshole. I think you always will be an asshole. So you're my sergeant, but we're not going to be friends. I go, okay, good start. And I said, listen, you're right. I agree. All I ask is, give me 6 months and judge me on who I am today. I didn't tell him any of this because I couldn't tell anybody about any of this, right? No one knew. No one knew. Like my family, that no one knew. And I know people around the world. No one knew. So 6 months later, we get together. He says, I have no idea what has gone on in your life, but you are not who I thought you were. So I was this professional, kind of probably a little bit wooden. I'm very introverted, so I'm not like gregarious. I'm not kind of out there. That's who I presented myself as. And yeah, I got different promotions and had some pretty phenomenal opportunities. People that have read the book have also, because I tried to intersperse in there some leadership concepts and some innovation and some technology and some other kind of things that I was blessed to be involved in. So that's what people would see, but inside it's an entirely different, right? It's a constant, and it's so tiring to constantly have to portray this fake image of who I am, when inside I have all this negative dialogue. And we're going through all this stuff with Lise. Anybody that's ever been to a grocery store with no money in the bank, well, we did that for multiple years. Even though I'm supposed to be making good money, like you go to the grocery store and you're there going, I have no friggin', and this is before you could look on your phone and say, oh, is there any money in the bank, right? And literally having to pull aside the meat and whatever while people are standing behind you. The stress. I was what I think the term is called kiting. I was using one credit card to pay another 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 bill to do, and this was going on for years, right? It was all horseshit. So very, very stressful, but outwardly, in fact, one of the really nice review that's in the book is from Matt Cox, who's the president of the Auto Police Association, and kind of put Matt under my wing early on. I used to coach competitive hockey with the three boys, and when I would be approached by people who wanted to join the police and want to me to kind of give them an endorsement, I'd say, yeah, be an assistant coach for me for a year. And because if I see how you behave with competitive hockey kids, their parents who can be not easy to deal with, the referees, all that stuff, that's going to tell me all I need to know. So Matt was one of my assistant coaches, and he's now the president of the association. He had no idea, right? People had no idea, because how could I tell anybody? Or like if I would have told anybody, my career was done. And which is, I think, one of the things that we really need to talk about. And I know Badge is working hard on this. Is what would someone do today in my shoes? Are you going to go, hey, boss, just so you know, I'm going to AA now?
And so that's what I wrote down. Why? I was like, because I was like, why? So before we get into the why, what was your home life? Give me the goods on your home life. And I know that this is the difficult piece, because work is, you can go like, yeah, you know what, I can be stoic. Home hurts. Home hurts.
It was terrible for Lise, for the kids. I was like I said, I was emotionally abusive. I was angry all the time. Why can't you do this, and why can't you do this, and how come? And like one of the things that alcoholics really suffer with, and I really have to work on this even today, is resentments. It was kind of a sidebar story, but I was at a conference once with a bunch of cops, and they had this kind of speaker. He says, "You guys are the worst. Somebody did something to you 25 years ago, and you will not let it go.
Yes.
That freaking
Yes.
that person's moved on 25 years ago, and you just let that reside in you." And I'm not talking about being alcoholic. That just seems to be our culture.
The
right?
anger. Yeah, the anger.
The anger and why this and why that. And yeah, it was. And again, it didn't, like when I first joined, I was super shy, right? And dating or whatever. I mean, I dated, but it was like I was very, very shy. I grew up in, like I said, a very, very Catholic family. Sin, sin, sin. All that kind of stuff, right? So I was super introverted, super shy. But somewhere along the path, this anger started to show up, and Lise was the brunt of that. And in the book, I talk in AA, they have what's called a lot of people refer to about the 12 steps, right? But there's also something called the 12 promises. And in the book, I talk about kind of giving some of the book away here, but in the book, I talk about how I've achieved all of the 12 promises except one. And I don't think I'll ever achieve it. And that, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically it says, you'll never look back with regret. Sorry. I will always look back with regret on how you haven't met Lise yet. I'll bring her to the Badger Life conference in the fall. I should have brought her last fall, because she's into all sorts of really cool things like neurolinguistic programming. She's a sports psychology consultant, right? And shamanism and rock reading. Like she's cool, right? And she likes all that stuff, and like the horses, like that you had last year, like the horse therapy. Like she would have been, oh my god, like she loves horses, right? But you haven't met her, so like she was and is this beautiful, vibrant, full of energy, like extroverted, take on the day, right? And I'm this kind of, oh my god, can we just go home now? Like the first question I asked today, the first when we have to go to somebody's party or whatever, the first question I ask is, what time can we leave? That's that's kind of, and the older I get, it's like, can we leave earlier, right? Because that's just kind of my nature. And here she's this full of life person. So I took this, metaphorically, I took this beautiful spirit and put her in a cage, right? She wasn't allowed to say anything that might make me look bad. She wasn't. I remember the first time when we first started dating, I lived with another cop at a really nice building in Ottawa. We went to this, and the old door knockers, ding ding ding, like you. Every time she'd come there, drive me nuts. Like, oh my God, how am I going to look to everybody, right? It's just that's please. And I talk in the book about we would play tennis together, and just happened to hit me in the back of the head with a tennis ball. Just happened to hit. We'd be playing squash. She just happened. Oh, I'm sorry. Racquetball or racket thrown at me in my head, like because she was losing. I always won, of course. Um, that's my wife, and I took that and kind of was terrible. So that was my family. And not I'd like I'd like to think we had lots of great times too. But as things got worse, then she, like I say, she got to the point where, thank God, that she had the courage and she had the strength.
Yes.
And one resource in the case of our friend's wife, and then through Serenity Renewal and Al-Anon, and that's really kind of the point of I hope of all of this is if you know someone. We'll probably get into this later, but if you know someone that's struggling, if you're struggling, there's help. And I think before we started, you talked about what you talk to recruits about. Do you want to repeat that?
So I always say to recruits that when you start and a family member taps you on the shoulder and says, "Listen, you got to stop being an asshole," don't go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." No, you need to listen to them because number one, they've seen it for a while. They've put up with it for a while, and it will come to a point where they may go, "That's it, I'm out." And they may not give the ultimatum of, "I'm out," or, you get help, or it may be, I'm done. And we hear it all the time about, like, when you talk about, and I'm hoping that with a newer generation, the whole resonating of the ego of like, I've got to be this persona of, that's why I'm very cognizant. I never use the word hero and I never use the word warrior because we're not heroes and we're not warriors. We're human beings. So if you put that on someone saying like, you are a hero, you are a warrior, then that tells your psyche, I can't show weakness. And that's a problem. And that's a problem. It has the ripple effect, right? And I think that you've lived it, you've wrote about it, and you're on the other side of like the hope, hold on, pain ends. That I think that we need to talk about more, that we need to delve in more of before you get the ultimatum from a family member.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, certainly in any of the first responder communities, the military, right? You're right in the middle of a very dangerous situation. That's not the time to say, "Well, I'm feeling a little." No, just we got a job to do. But when that's over, then if you're struggling or you're thinking, the solution for me today is X, gambling, drinking, whatever,
Yeah.
then those are the signs that, okay, maybe it's time I talk to somebody. And there are programs, and thank goodness, maybe we could flip the page a little bit, but with Canada. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
what are programs that are available
So,
for
and I
people
think
today?
too that I think what we need to talk about more is the leadership and proactiveness, because when you said like when you're in the thick of it, that's too late to go. Holy shit! What do I do now? You need to have all of those things in place so then when you do have a bad day, when you do have a bad call, when you are in crisis, you have the control of going, I got this. Yeah, I've got this. And not just you, the family. The family has to be in every aspect of every promotion, of every job placement. There has to be the family element, and it has to be done as a collective unit. I've always said like I've said to all public safety personnel, that it's not okay for you to go, okay, you know what, I've had a bad day. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to play video games for the next 4 hours. That's an out. Like that's a cop out. That's not okay. You have to decide, this is this much time where you're going to gather your thoughts, you're going to do your proactive piece, you're going to, ground yourself, and then you're going to be able to, you know, go in with your family. It's not up to family members to constantly, will they have to? Yes, they will, to constantly hold the load. It's not fair. And we could be so more proactive on the other side and do it collectively as a family unit, which we should be doing anyways. Right. And that's what we're trying to do, is take the more proactive piece of get the programs together to say, recruits, have a plan in place. Talk to your family members, let your family members know. And it doesn't just have to be, because I mean, so we do peer support for family members on Wednesday nights. Not only do we have spouses, we have family members, because you stop to think about, when you get on, you're young, you may not have a spouse or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you may be living with your parents, so they need to know that this is what's going on, and to kind of like process things. And then with our peer support on Monday nights, it's connection and community. And Lance, you said it, this, when you went to a meeting, you feel the connection in the community. You have that. And that is powerful stuff. When you have someone going, yeah, me too. Yep, me too. That's the power. That's the absolute power.
And if I could, before you go on, so the book's now published. Just in the last few months, come to the realization, Lisa and I've come to the realization that, she went got help and I went and got help. And we both went to get help. You know who we never took to get help? Our kids.
Your kids.
Our kids.
Yes.
And I regret that. And I think they're all doing well and whatnot, but who knows we don't know. I don't know to this date the impacts my behavior had on our adult children, right? There's in the book I talk about, I talk about post-traumatic stress, and I use the analogy of A Christmas Carol and Marlowe carrying the chains, right? That incident that I talked about very early on with the child-related incident, that was the first chain that added, right? They kept on being added, right? And we can't see them, we can't feel them, but they're there. It's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. So I think that's why, for example, Badge does this, and of course, Beyond Blue Canada, Dell and their team. That's all about family, and then Serenity Renewal in Ottawa, which is where we first went to. In fact, one of the people I kind of talk about a little bit in the book is, her name was Sister Louise. She's passed on, but she was this little pixie of a nun, and she ran Serenity Renewal in Ottawa. And I remember going there, and of course she knew exactly what it was, right? So she knew I was full of shit. And she'd be talking to Lise, and I try to interject or something. She just put the hand up, like, I have no interest in talking to you, buddy. Like, and I was like, what the hell?
Do you not know who I am?
Yeah, do you not know who I am? And that Serenity Renewal, and they still have family programs, and they still do all this stuff. So I think that's why these were the three charities that I really am thankful that all of you said yes. Again, you're not going to be raking in a ton of dough doing this, but I really do want to try to kind of get the word out there. And there's lots of other great charities out there. There's lots of other great programs, right? Every organization, I would think at this stage, has EAP and all these kinds of things. So just ask for the help, right? Just kind of say, listen, I think something's not right, and I need some help. And I think that's the critical message here.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I know, like, Dilnaz, I absolutely adore her. And when I took this position, she was one of my first phone calls of like, what needs to happen. And I think when you're dealing, and when you're dealing with charities, you want to align yourself with people that are looking after the people. And I always say that for Badge of Life Canada, for Beyond the Blue, we're looking after the people, and the organizations can wait, because it's the people that matter. And if I only touch one person, that's it. Like that's all I want, is because that's what matters. because it's the ripple effect. Because not only are you touching this person, you're touching their wife, their husband, you're touching their family members as you go along. And I've always said, and I know that a couple times we've talked about, what we're doing right now is we're planting the seed for a tree that we're never going to sit under. And
Mm,
until we continue to do that and continue to have these difficult conversations, um, and crack open the nut of this is what needs to happen. Just ask. If you don't know, just ask, because someone will point you in the right direction. And we use all of the slogans of like, you're not alone and all. We have to mean it. Like, don't just, because that's like, how are you? I'm fine. And then you move on to something else. Well, fine is my F word, because as soon
mm,
as you say that to me, everyone goes, because we've all been fine. I'm fine.
mm.
And that's like leadership pieces. We need to, get into that. We need to delve into how can you be, because you said it when you were car to car and the guy called you an asshole. Okay, now let's reevaluate. Because lots
Yes.
of people go like, you think I'm an asshole? I'll show you asshole. And then right. And so we need to reevaluate and say, what about me? Like, what am I doing? And we have to look after ourselves, because you said it.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, there's the members and there's their families, but there's also I believe there's a role obviously for senior management,
Absolutely.
huge
Yes.
role. The whole culture, that's another entire webinar. But there's also a role for our peers, our partners,
Yes.
right? That if
Yes.
you see someone that they could be struggling, or maybe you see this flash of anger, whatever it is that you see, it's a kind of very sensitive, but just have a cup of coffee. Listen, I got to be honest with you. Like, what I saw yesterday, that worried me. Like,
Yes.
what's going on? In fact, very briefly, this partner that I had, that was the first time I ever saw it. It wasn't with a partner. He did this with a suspect, and he told me to put away my book. We're doing an interview. And I go, what do you mean, put away my book? I'm the scribe. What do you mean, put away the book? And he looked at this guy and said, listen, like, bottom line is, you're being charged. You're going to go to jail. But what I want to know is why. What's going on in your life? Like, clearly. And I'm going in my head, because I was not healthy at that stage, like, who cares? But he had been in the program for a long time. He's touching this human being.
Yes.
He saw a human being,
Yes.
right? And invariably there'd be a tear, and they'd open up, and eventually he would actually get them the help. Yes, they went to jail, but when they came back out, he was there for them. So we're all human beings,
Yes.
right? And yeah, there's some really bad people we have to deal with, but they're human beings. So if we can help anybody, partner, suspect, whoever, then I think we're called to that.
We don't know what people have in their backpack.
If they only knew.
Exactly. Exactly. Like it's so true. Like I think, and I want to say, like, kind of as we're wrapping up, um, I want to say how courageous both you and Lise are, because this is a lot, and don't underestimate cracking open a life of secrecy and what's behind the curtain of, of smiles, and everything looks wonderful, because you never know what goes on behind closed doors, and you're the poster child for that. And I applaud both of you for putting it out there, for being vulnerable. And vulnerability is power. Everybody, vulnerability is power. And we can't overstate that enough. So, Lance, I leave the floor to you. We have 2 minutes left. I leave it to you, because I love the role that you're playing.
Well, first of all, thank you, Laura, for being such a great guide today. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the last kind of year or so. But I think my final comment is, like, to your point, is I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for my wife, for her strength and her courage. And I for all the partners out there, that are struggling, or that just don't know what to do, reach out, get help. You do not need to wait for your partner to get help for you to get help. And one of the things you learn in Al-Anon is the concept of they're not happy. If they're not happy, I'm not happy is bullshit.
Yes.
Look after yourself, get your help. if you can find a way to bring them along, great. If not, look after yourself. And that's exactly what Lise did. And Laura, I can't wait for you and Lise to meet, have a glass of wine, and I think the two of you are going to hit along famously.
Amazing. Thank you, Lance. And thank you for everyone that joined today.